So in this second part of this topic, we're going to look at more into detecting, but here more specifically on missing values. So for this, we're going to use the change in Omani livelihoods over time case studies. A quick overview. So this case study is given in more detail in topic 1, but a quick overview of this case study is that it examines survey data taken at 2 time points and illustrates the changing nature of farming ecosystems. The aim of the case study is to both document what's happened in the past and consider future perspectives. Again, as we outlined before in the previous presentation, the interview data was entered in Excel database, coded and inspected for completeness of records, plausibility of answers, and so forth. So completeness of records is kind of what we're going to focus on here. And this is what we mean by missing values. Was a value there or was it not given? Did someone reply to that question or did they not? So detecting missing values. To identify and explore missing values and variables, we can utilize the filter and pivot table tools. Any answers that are not given by an individual are missing. And to add to that as well, even sometimes it might be that someone does give an answer, but it's clearly an incorrect answer. Let's say that someone gives their age as -10 or 1978. Well, if someone gives their age as 1978, you might have an inkling that it's year. You might be able to go back and check that, verify that. If someone gives their age as -10, you kind of definitely know that that's not possible. However, you can still do what you can, discuss with experts to see if you can correct it. But in the meantime, that value will be missing. So detecting missing values can manifest in different ways within a data set. So we observe scattered missing values where certain variables may have incomplete data and for specific observations. So here, when we looked at was there a change of fallow land in the last 5 years, just a random selection of people had that as missing. Now, if we look at this question before it, do you have fallow land? So in N, some people are saying yes and some people are saying no. Well, if they're saying that they do have fallow land, and then they're not giving a reply to if there's a change of fallow land in the last 5 years, that's very different to if someone said that they don't have fallow land. If someone doesn't have fallow land, then of course we don't expect there to be a change of fallow land in the last 5 years because they don't have fallow land. So that kind of missing variable is slightly different because there isn't a correct value for that. There isn't a real value for that. There isn't a value for that we are missing. They just don't have fallow land. Whereas for row 1 here, or what looks like row 1 anyway, and this row here, our third row down in the filtered data set, they both do have fallow land, but have not answered if there was a change in the last 5 years. You can also have missing values in entire rows, which indicates a kind of lack of response for a set of questions from an individual. So here we can see for about 15, 13 or so individuals, they've given no answer to a whole set of questions about livestock. Now, is this because they don't have livestock? If it is because they don't have livestock, then it's fine that those answers are missing because they obviously don't need to answer those questions. They don't have livestock. However, if these individuals do have livestock and they're not answering those questions, then it's missing. There is a correct value there that they are not giving. They can manifest in other ways as well, missing values. So as we pointed out before, some values might be missing because the individuals were never asked that question. So in those last 2 slides, we looked at filters, and in this slide, we're going to look at pivot tables to illustrate this point. So here we're looking at 2 questions. Have you stopped selling altogether? And how many products did you stop to sell? So we see that for no and yes here is about have you stopped selling altogether? And so 31 people have said, no, I haven't stopped selling altogether. And 35 people have said, yes, I have stopped selling altogether. And then these counts in our columns are how many products did you stop to sell? Well, this looks correct to me, because the people who said that we haven't stopped selling altogether, all 31 of them have said to that question, well, 0. If I haven't stopped selling altogether, then I haven't stopped selling any products. I've stopped to sell 0 products. That's what the 0 is. Where we have yes of people saying, I have stopped selling altogether, we then have the 17 have stopped selling one product, all the way up to 2 people who have stopped to sell 5 products. And so here, this looks absolutely fine and what we would expect, because if we had a no here, but we had kind of some people saying 3, well, then that would be a complete discrepancy. If we had a yes here, as we do, but we still had people saying 0, then that would also be a discrepancy. So our total here is 66, and we know that that's how many rows there are in our data. Therefore, everyone is accounted for here. There are no missing values here. So we can detect missing values using filters and pivot tables. These can be detected in a statistics software such as RStudio or RInstat or any software of your choice. Values are missing for different reasons. It might be missing because, let's say that you were doing a study where you were looking at individual people themselves, or in the case of our Omani data, we're looking at different households. Now, we might have that some households have left this study. This has actually happened in the Omani data. We have missing values in our 2018 for some households who were there in 2007. That's a 10-year period, more or less. And so some people who were there in 2007 have left by 2018. So that's why we have some missing values there. It might be that the individual didn't want to answer a question for personal reasons. Perhaps they were asked a sensitive question, such as, what is your weight? It might be that the individual wasn't even asked that question because they responded in a certain way to a previous question, such as, do you have fallow land? And obviously, if you answered no to that, you're not going to be given those follow-up questions on fallow land. Now, what I really hope you can appreciate here is that the cause of the missing value is important when we're handling it. Let's take those 3 cases again. So the first one, the individuals left the study. We've got our household, and they were there in 2007, but they weren't there in 2018. Well, to me, the big question there is, why did they leave the study? Why did they leave the region? Now, particularly in this case here, when it's a study about people's kind of farming habits, how things have changed over that 10 years. Is it that our more extreme cases have left the study? Is it that our people who were really unhappy before, therefore left the region? And therefore the data that we're actually looking at in 2018 are the people that don't mind it as much. Whereas the people that were not enjoying it, who had poor perceptions for the future, are the people that left the study. Well, that changes everything in our conclusions. If we're using this study to look at kind of people's perceptions for the future, and we have that in 2018, the farmers that still live in the region are the ones that have good perceptions for the future, and that's why they live in the region. Well, that's completely different to just that, oh, some random farmers just happened to leave. It could have been that just randomly people left the region, or it could have been that they left for a reason. And this is what we mean by that cause of missing value is important. Why is that value missing? It's missing because they're not in the region. Why are they not in the region? Is it because they have poor perceptions, or is it just something completely unrelated? If we take our second example, that's the same thing. An individual might not want to answer, or similar thing. They might not want to answer for personal reasons. Well, let's say someone's asked about their weight and they don't want to answer that question for personal reasons. That could be that it's just completely random on who does or doesn't want to answer it. Or it could be that there's some individuals who are more sensitive about their weight. It might be that there's a certain demographic out there, a certain age group out there, who are more sensitive about speaking about their weight. It might be that there's a certain group. It might be that people who have a higher weight or a lower weight don't want to talk about their weight. So again, we need to question, why is this value missing? Why don't we have their weight? Do we not have their weight because we just couldn't measure it that day? In which case it's just completely random that we happen to not have scales or whatever that day? Or do we not have their weight because they didn't want to give their weight because they were sensitive about it? And then the final one is that the individual wasn't asked that question because they responded in a previous way. They responded a certain way to a previous question. So this, again, we here would have a missing value because an individual wasn't ever asked that question. I hope you can appreciate that this is completely different to what we saw in that first case of, in the first case of, why did you leave the study? Is it because you have poor perceptions? To the third question, to the third instance here of being, well, we didn't ask them that question because they said that they didn't have fallow land. We didn't ask them about their children because they don't have children. So therefore, we don't have any value to fill in there. We don't have a value which is missing because we didn't get the data. We have a value which doesn't have a value. Thank you very much.